This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchioni.
I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I look forward to all of them because they're just so packed with information that we can assimilate and just, transformation stuff.
Yeah, that's such a much more uplifting way to say that than what people used to say about me, which is that I'm full of it. So I accept. What are we going to talk about today?
Perfectionism and purposefulness, and where there's, I think there's a line that you cross. You can be very purposeful in doing things the best way and all of that. But then there's probably a line that you cross that you go over into perfectionism. And that's when everything gets messed up, because that's on that side of the line is stress, and it's unnecessary because it edges God out. I don't think God is on the other side of that. We have no business on that other side of the line. And so once we get over there, I think, we just kind of edge God out, or, do what I did remember I told you I used to go to clubs. I said, God, you wait outside.
Yeah. God, you wait in the car.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go in and do some things that you shouldn't know about, as though that's going to work. Yeah. Well, as this will be an interesting conversation between 2 recovering perfectionists, because I am a recovering perfectionist for many, many years. And you came into this conversation 160 some episodes ago, proudly claiming to be a card-carrying perfectionist.
Absolutely, yes.
Or a card-carrying control freak, which is the action of a perfectionist. So, and as you're talking about this, it brings up for me the question between perfectionism and purposefulness. Is it possible that the difference is whether we're talking about what our activities are going to be, what we're going to do to make it perfect, versus purposefulness, which is where we understand how we want it to feel when it comes out and allow the infinite to fulfill that purpose without us necessarily defining how many teeth are on each gear?
Well, the way you just described purposefulness is a bit spiritually mature, I would say.
Sorry.
Because I'm coming from, if you're coming from the side where you're learning, and the word out there now is deconstructing and reconstructing. If you're coming from that perspective, the way you describe purposefulness is very mature. On the front end, the beginning, I decide what the purpose is, or however I get it. This is my purpose for doing this. And I drive toward that, and everything, that I see, feel, or whatever, that will make that happen. I go for it at the point of losing sleep. Now, this is past tense. I'm not that bad now, but
right. You still know how to do it, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can bring it back up if you need to.
And I catch myself, So I don't know if we ever really ever stop, but you can get a grip on it. But yeah, that's why I said that was a bit mature, because after you learn about it, then the purpose changes from I have to make it perfect to let's see where this goes. I think that's how I feel it. Well, let's see where this goes, because apparently, and then here's another thing, my purpose is not enough. It's not high enough, no matter how wonderful and excellent I think it is. It's not God. Do you know what I mean? It's not, it's not that. So I had to come to grips with that too, because, I thought God gives you the idea and you like slay it until it's perfect.
Yeah, that can kind of try and kick God out of the solution as well. So I have a question for you about those people who are not spiritually evolved or moving along the path where they can have that level of maturity that you're talking about. What is purposefulness in that context?
It is that you look at what God wants, you perceive what God wants. Now that's quite broad, because it comes from the interpretations of Scripture over time. So however you've been indoctrinated to know what God wants. And this is what I do within my skill set. If you think that far, this is what I do to fulfill this purpose that God has for my life. It's quite lovely, actually. But it's rather, it heads toward frustration, because it really does edge out God. But your question was, did I answer your question?
You did answer my question, and you have either intentionally or inadvertently given me the guidance that I was looking for. So there is a practice that has come about in New Thought probably in the last 20, 30 years. And this was, people think that there are two different sorts of spiritual practice. One of them is meditation, which is where you get still and listen for the voice of the infinite. And the other one is prayer, which is where you set the intention and speak to the infinite. And that's kind of the conversation is going back and forth between those. And so then this Michael Beckwith came along and came up with a third one, which is a combination, which is the life visioning process. And in life visioning, we combine the intention setting and the meditation into a single practice. And we ask questions of the infinite, but they're not specific questions. So we go into meditation, we get ourselves into that quiet space. And the first question is, what's God's highest idea of this? And this can be my life, or the project that we're working on, or the ad campaign, or the birthday party for my kid. What is God's highest idea of this? And then once there's been clarity about that, then the next question is, what's mine to do? And then there's another one, what's mine to let go of? There can be different flavors of it. Who am I in this?
Yeah.
And then, and it's all about getting ourselves out of the way. The most amazing thing about doing this as a spiritual practice is if we do it in a group, then different people in the group will get different parts of the answer. And as you go around and share what the answers are, you start to get clarity on what the theme is, because the infinite is able to speak differently through all of us. The first time that I did a life visioning process, it was to come up with a logo for the spiritual community that I was part of. And there were maybe a dozen of us sitting in the circle. And one of them is my good friend who's a designer, looking for the direction about where we're going to go with this graphic mark that's supposed to represent the community. And we're going around sharing what the answers were, the responses, the insights that we got for each of the sections. And one of the people says, I have no idea. I just got a really strong visual of a baseball diamond. I have no idea where that came from. Like, okay, baseball diamond. And the answer, it's kind of like improv. It's like whatever comes up, you share it, you put it out there, you'd let go of judgment or attachment to it. 3 people later says somebody says, yeah, what I got was, if you build it, they will come. Which explains where the baseball diamond thing came from the movie Field of Dreams. So, and it was obvious, oh, okay, there's something bigger that's going on here. And cut to the very end of this. This is, according to Dave, who did the design, this was the most satisfying and easiest and most effective logo development program he'd ever done. And he did one for Wharton. So
As you were telling that, I was thinking about the faith that you need to have in the process. That's a beginning, and then
It's huge.
yeah,
It's huge.
it is. And then you got to hope everybody that's in the circle has that same level of faith. Although I guess it's not necessary because, you can just gather the information that comes. But to me, it's a high level process.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there's somebody whose job it is, whose purpose is to kind of go and pop everyone else's bubbles, it gets really obvious quickly. If there's somebody who's a disbeliever who's sitting in the circle, something will happen that makes everybody go, yeah, we'd like to buy you some coffee and we'd like to go out and get it now. Here's my Starbucks card.
I want to give you a quick story about how this worked not so well for me. This was way, way back in my 20s. And I say that because I want you to understand how young I was at the time. And I was in corporate America, and that was a very different place for me to be and for others to accept me being there. But, I didn't know. I was very confident in my skill sets. And we had a project, and I came into the room and I took charge and I said, this is what we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. And somebody said to me, well, who made you in charge? And I said, I did, because I know how this is supposed to work. Okay, let's move on. And
It work?
It worked like a charm, but that's where my head was at the time. It doesn't have to work. It didn't work like that all the time because for a number of reasons. You block out other people's gifts in sharing, and you can alienate people, which I didn't care about either. I was purposeful. That's why I said that. What you said was so mature. I was not mature in that way. This is where it has to be. This is the end product. I can see the way to get there. I don't want to hear any problems here. In fact, we're going to get there early.
And what you're talking about is actually very mature if you think about it in the context of even really high level players. You're probably thinking, okay, these people, I don't know what they've got going on, but I know that I can do this, so I'm going to step up and take care of it. So you get two Major League Baseball players, and they're both the top. I mean, the top of their field, and they're professional baseball players, and they're playing outfield, and so they're really good at doing what they're doing. And a pop fly goes up, and it's right between the two of them. Between the two of them, they need to catch the ball, but also between the two of them, they need to make sure that only one of them catches the ball. It's not like one is qualified and the other one is not. It's not like one of them can say, I'm better at this, so get out of my way. It's not like I'm just going to say, I got this because you can't do it. There's the communication that goes on between them. It's, I got it, you got it. We're going to together make sure that it's done. And that becomes teamwork. So that goes back to the oneness about being able to say, what's God's highest idea here? And it's for one of us to grab the ball and the other one to stand back and be ready to do something in case it goes wrong. So lots of times we don't think of that.
Told you, my father said in one of his moments of clarity to a nurse, he had Alzheimer's, and he said, if you want something done, give it to Carol. There will be nothing standing. She'll have no friends, but it will get done. I thought, that is such an... I heard this coming down the hall, so he didn't know I was there listening. And I had to stop and think, I'm not exactly sure that that's a nice thing to be known for. On the one hand, yeah, but on the other hand, I don't think so. But that was, I guess he knew me that way. And that's a very different way of thinking than on, what did you call it? Evolved thinking? Enlightened thinking?
Mature, spiritually mature, whatever.
Yeah, it's very different. And I'm glad not to be that anymore, at least consciously. I can feel it
Well,
now.
yeah, and I think Dad alluded to it. Perfectionism is that scorched earth. Nothing is going to get in the way. Nothing is going to be standing until she gets her way. And purposefulness is this is going to get done, and it's going to be a complete success, and everybody's going to be happy about it when we're finished. And if you're not going to be happy about it anyway, then I'm sorry, you're one of the bowling pins that's going down.
And what about when things turn out differently than was intended? I think it's good to have a plan. I really do. I think that it's good. But to be open that plan isn't necessarily etched in stone. So you have to ask yourself, what about when the result is better than your plan was or your intention? Do you know, you do your best, but it could be that somebody else has a better idea. And that's okay.
And that's a piece of the visioning is what is God's highest idea?
Yes.
Of this particular situation.
Yes.
And if it shows up as the one that I was thinking of, great. And if it shows up as the one that the person sitting down the street from me or in the next cubicle or even at a competing company thought of, if that's what's making our industry or our community or our world better, then okay, I get to let go of the thought that I needed to be the one who was in charge and having the success because there's something wonderful. There's something purposeful, to use your word, that's going on rather than me being in charge and throttling the life out of everything that's not the way that I think it ought to be.
And the word that you use, let go, that is such a critical piece of it. Because I've always been this way. I don't give a darn whether I get the accolades. I don't need the spotlight. I don't. What I need to do and grooved on is that I made that happen. Okay. It worked. And I made it happen. And I don't care if you don't say, oh, Carol did this. I know, and I'm good with it. But even that is not enough. You have to let go of that. Whatever it is that floats your boat, you let go of that. And that's difficult. That
definitely can be difficult. And I'll give you a quick analogy before we take a break. And that's the architect who is working with the client and they come up with the idea for the house and the architect does the design and draws the blueprints and then the builder comes in. And the architect lets go of the building, doesn't go in carrying 2x4s and hammering nails and pouring concrete and so forth. However, the architect can come by and check from time to time to make sure that what's showing up in the world and what was on the blueprint are in harmony. And if there's something that's not appropriate, then the architect gets to look that fact in the face and say, this is not according to plan, and we get to change that. And again, not going to change it themselves, but somebody's going to take all those windows out and put in the right ones.
Yeah. So it's like there's ego involved all in this, which is another discussion. But it's what's giving the ego its energy, right? I mean, what is it?
Let's take the break before that, and then we'll get back to what's giving the ego its energy.
Okay.
Because otherwise we got another 3 hours. Here we go.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the new thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
What gives ego its energy? Oh man, is that a loaded question? And of course, and this is just my opinion. And it formulated itself when you asked, because it's a great question. What gives ego its energy? And I think there are two things that give ego its energy. One is passion, and the other is fear. And the really fun part is that you never know which one it is.
Passion and fear.
I love this idea. I need to make this happen. This is something fabulous that I want to bring into, and I can do this, and I've got the creative expertise, and I got the tools and everything else, and it's going to be great. Or, oh my God, if I don't do this, it's going to screw up, so I need to grab all the tools and all the materials and do this myself, because otherwise it's going to be bad.
I think you have to have a real good talk with yourself when it comes. And it's not one of those last minute talks either.
No, this is an ongoing conversation. This is a dialogue with within.
And you have to be honest with yourself. And I've always been, and I use this term, extremely lucky, because what I really want and what makes my heart sing is a little bit off of the mainstream of things. So, I was tricked into thinking myself that my ego was under control. Like, I'm doing this confession thing. This is terrible. I'm confessing, but I always thought it was. But it's because not very many people were trying to get in the space that I was. So you can feel very comfortable that you're not, in the rat race, and you're not competing, and you're not this and you're not that, until somebody does want it.
Mm-hmm.
And
ooh, let's go over and take something out of Carol's backyard.
Yeah, and well, the fangs came out. And I thought, what was that? And I get along quite nicely that way. Absolutely nicely that way. It's not intentional. It's just that, my desires aren't necessarily in the mainstream. So, but there's others out there that probably feel the same way. And yeah. So that's why I said you really have to have a talk with yourself, so that when you have those moments where your ego is confronted, you don't hit the sidewalk. You just kind of.
Part of it has to do, I think, with our perspective. And I have an example, as I might have shared this with you before, from way long ago, many careers back, when I was a zany comedian on the radio. I would do morning shows. So, and every morning show in town, we would listen to the news on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday morning, we would tell jokes about what was going on in the news. That's kind of, it's still the way it works. Late night TV works exactly the same way. And sometimes I'd write a really good joke. And every once in a while, somebody at the station across town would come up with the same joke. And we're both watching the same newscast. We're living in the same world. It is possible for the same complete bizarre thought to occur to two wacky people who have a job of getting up way too early in the morning and trying to be funny. So I refer to that as parallel creativity. We both get the same stimulus. We both come up with the same joke, tell it maybe a little bit differently. People say, they stole your joke. It's like, they didn't steal my joke. They came up with the joke at the same time I did. And then other people would, we'd come up with something very funny. And then we'd hear other radio stations doing that, whether it's other stations in town or a station that was monitoring us out of town, listening, and then they're repeating the stuff that we came up with. And people would be trying to, to pick at my ego. Doesn't that make you angry when people are stealing your stuff? And it didn't. I was a little bit flattered, a little bit, sometimes would wish that I was on their air saying the same thing. But that was back in the days when the Doritos commercials were crunch all you want, we'll make more. And I said, that's what I'm doing. Take whatever you want, I've got creativity here. I came up with something. If you like it, go ahead and use it. My gift isn't that I have this backlog of old jokes. It's that I can come up with new jokes. And that's just my perspective. Yeah, take them, have them. If it's going to bring joy and success, and in that case, a couple of yucks to somebody in the middle of a long commute, great. And if I get credit for it, wonderful. If I don't, it's still served its purpose.
But I still want to put that word maturity on there. Because one of the...
Yeah, that was really unusual back in the days. People thought, why aren't you being much more angry?
Well, I mean...
Because Bill, you're so angry anyway. Why aren't you angry about this?
I don't know about the anger part. But that's... Even now, the perspective that you had that I'm talking about is that I can come up with something else. Yeah. This is not it. And I think that that's being comfortable with your gifts and who you are and who God is and how God works in, through, and as us. All of that comes into play, but you have to know it. Or you'll revert back to, that was my joke, or that was my whatever. Because sermon writing was really a thing for me. And once in a while, somebody might come up with it from an angle that I did. And I was like, how did that happen? Because here's the thing. Okay, you're going to really laugh at this. Because without knowing it, I always entered into the process from a metaphysical lens. I just didn't know what I was doing. And that isn't that popular on that side. Okay, so I didn't know what I was doing. And if somebody else had, I'm like, what? But then there's spirit, like it's not mine. And so when I was listening to you, I still think it's a level that you want to reach to be able to say that and feel okay with it.
Yeah. Now, when you first heard somebody else give a sermon from a metaphysical perspective, where you maybe kind of knew what you were doing, but maybe didn't, and suddenly somebody's doing the same thing, and it's on the one hand threatening. It's like, well, how they're stealing my stuff, and how come they're using my technique, and how do they come up with that, and where did it come from? And then perhaps a little following on is like, this is part of my spiritual growth and perspective and maturity, and they've got it. So there's another one of me out there.
Well, I wish I could say that I said that then, but I was...
No, along the way. It takes a while for that to happen.
I was confused because there's a certain way that the Bible is interpreted in the traditional church, even whether it's mainline or fundamentalist. There are shades of sameness in all of those interpretations. Now, the metaphysical interpretation is certainly different. So I came at it from a different perspective, not understanding that it was metaphysical, but because, and I'm not trying to take credit, I say this all the time, because of books I read. And I didn't know what they were. I didn't know that they were messing with my my interpretation. I just thought, hey, this is it. But so when I would hear that, I didn't necessarily think somebody was coming up with something metaphysical. I was completely immature saying, how'd they get that? That was...
How'd they get that?
That was mine.
They've been peeking inside my head.
Because 99% of the way this particular text is preached, it's this way. And I came up with it this way. So you know what I did? This must be confession day. I'd go back to that. I'd go back to that text and I'd find another way to bring a meaning out of it, which was a great exercise for where I am now. I just didn't know that was what was happening. But then it's not me. It's spirit. That's how just spirit works.
And it always is. Sometimes we think it's us and it's actually spirit. And back to the topic, the difference between perfectionism and purposefulness is whether we think we're doing it ourselves, it's perfectionism, or purposefulness, which is where we have an idea and we're turning it over to the infinite and letting it cook and see what happens. You bring that up. One of the spiritual communities I was part of, there was a tendency for the senior minister when doing sermons to like start telling a story and go partway through and then get distracted and start telling another story and then go on for a while and then get distracted instead and start a third story and then eventually just stop. And it was very frustrating because you never got to hear the end of the story and it wasn't particularly well woven together. I went to a national level conference and a minister, a woman who had a wonderful reputation, was on the platform, and she starts telling a story and then she changes the subject and she starts telling a different story and I go, uh-oh. And then she gets herself distracted and she starts telling a third story. And it's like, oh man, does everybody do this? And then in the last 30 seconds, she brought all three stories together and it was the same story from three different perspectives. And I said, ooh, that's how I want to do it. And I have a few times, and it's a lot of work.
Yes. Yes.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. But listen, I grooved on that work, right? I grooved on that work. And so if somebody else was like doing that, what?
How dare
do you know how many hours I put in this? So, yeah, I mean, you got to get a grip on yourself. That's what my kids laugh. They say, you used to say, get a grip on your little self. Yeah, I did.
Crunch all you want, we'll make more. Let's take another break and then we'll come back and do the world's shortest life visioning. It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at BeTheLight.com. That's B-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at BeTheLight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
We are talking today about perfectionism and purposefulness. And I was intentional about being able to say that entire title once without stumbling over either of the words. So my ego is now patting itself on the back.
Good job. Good job.
Yeah. Yeah. So before the break, I made the outward-leaning offer to do a prayer, which is actually a very brief version of the life visioning process. And I mentioned earlier that life visioning is the amalgam. It's a combination prayer and meditation. And usually the process is much longer than it's going to be now, just because it's the time that we allow ourselves to be in meditation that allows the answers to come to us. And I will preface this that if this seems intriguing, then find somebody to do a life visioning process with you in its entirety. There are lots of people who can do that. If you find yourself stymied and you want to find somebody who can do life visioning with you, that is a perfect reason to go to the Be the Light website and make a request of me there, because I can connect you up with somebody who can help with that. And the life visioning process works for everything. Because what we do in life visioning, and I'm starting now, is we turn away from the world that's around us and we open ourselves up to that infinite creative power, that one intelligence, that one divine presence that knows and creates and shares itself as everything. That is the one divine mind. It knows all. the mind with which I think is part of that one mind. All of the ideas, all of the knowing, all of the guidance, all of the intuition that is available anywhere comes from that one mind. It is all known in the mind of the infinite, and it can be known in my mind as well. So as I relax into the awareness of my connection with that one, that there is one mind and I am part of it, it is possible that wisdom and insight become available in a greater way than I might have thought possible. As I meditate on that, as I open myself up to that possibility, it allows me to ask the question, what is God's highest idea in this next endeavor? And the endeavor can be whatever we're working on. For my life, that's a big endeavor. For this project. For the font for my brochure. What is God's highest idea in this endeavor? And allow time in the quiet for the answer to come. And after the answer comes, go back into the quiet and allow the question to repeat. And see if the same answer comes up. Or see if a different answer comes up. Keeping in mind that if the answer that comes up is something that you already know, it's possibly not visioning, it's possibly just your recollection or your desire or your creativity wanting to have its way. What's God's highest idea for this endeavor? The next question is, what is mine to embrace? There's something for me to open to, and it might be something different than what I thought it was. What is mine to embrace? And again, that time in the quiet, allowing the infinite to make some suggestions, allowing time for our ego to get out of the way so that we can get clarity and insight in the process. Almost as important, the next question, what's mine to release? There might be some attachment that I have. There might be some way that my tendencies, my ego, my hidden belief are influencing my understanding of this vision. What's mine to release? Another question we can ask is, what resources are already available to help bring this into being? And again, let the infinite make its suggestions and allow time to get our own judgment out of the way. Who am I as this unfolds? Maybe I have a different identity. Maybe my role is different than what I thought it was. Maybe I'm not the perfectionist who's egomaniacally running the program. Maybe I have a different role. Who am I in this process? And the last question is a catch-all. What else is there to be known? If there's something that we didn't ask about, it gets to show up in that step. It's a very simple process. It is a very simple process. And that infinite intelligence, that divine mind that knows everything, that creates everything, that shares itself as all of its creation, shares itself through the process. And each of us is already being guided to our next engagement in this visioning process. Perhaps there's a new idea about a project that's been on the burner for a while that's coming about. Perhaps there's the inspiration to take some challenge into a visioning process. Different for each of us, and good unfolding for all of us. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the good. I'm grateful for the new spiritual tools that we have. I'm grateful for the wonderful way that this comes about. And I'm grateful to be able to speak this word and release it into that creative law that creates everything. And to know it is now creating this. And so I let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.